Welcome to the Vandy Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Lee. Our guest today will be Norman Jordan, the color commentator for Vanderbilt football. Thanks to our sponsor, Wellspire, Nashville's Learning and Development Center, which offers personal and professional development opportunities in a beautiful facility in the Gulch neighborhood. Stop by for an event with world-renowned speakers or host an off-site event that will wow your team or your clients. Kickoff time for the Missouri game has been set. That game, October 19th in Nashville. Game time for that one will be 3 p.m., just as it is for the upcoming UNLV game. Our guest line, presented by Boll & Branch, started by Vanderbilt graduates Scott and Missy Tannen. I've slept on Boll & Branch sheets for 5 to 6 years now. And in case I'd forgotten how much I liked them, I found out this weekend when I took a road trip and slept on something other than Boll & Branch sheets for 3 nights. And let me tell you, it is a very, very discernible difference. The sheets are fair trade certified. That means they are made under safe conditions by men and women who are treated and paid fairly. You can return them for free after you try them for a month, but you are not going to want to. Once you get the sheets, try the mattress. That was voted best mattress of 2018. Go to bollandbranch.com. That is spelled B-O-L-L. Enter the promo code Vandy. Get $50 off your first set of sheets. Norman Jordan joins us now. He is the color commentator for Vanderbilt football on most weekends. Norman was not the color commentator last weekend, and boy, you know how to pick them in terms of avoiding them, I guess. But in all seriousness, Norman, welcome back to the podcast. Thank you for joining us. You were away for your daughter's wedding this weekend, and I hope you're not calling us from the graveyard shift somewhere to pay for that. But either way, we're glad to have you. Thanks for joining us. Hope you're doing well.
Wait, they cost money? I didn't know anything about that.
Well, that's what they tell me.
Yeah, doing great. Thank you. I almost feel like I need to. I'm very thankful for John Gromos for covering for me, and almost feel like I need to send him a "I'm sorry" text because I know it's a tough game to do.
Well, I feel like I need to send you an "I'm sorry" text for last podcast. My voice was just shot, and I couldn't do much to on my end to help the show. So thank you for bearing with me through that. That was a brutal last week when my voice just, I don't know what happened, but for probably 3 or 4 days, I could barely speak.
Well, you know, you got a face for radio, so it works out really well.
Exactly. Thank you. We much love in this conversation, but
yeah, how much they put me on.
Right. Exactly. I think this is why we are friends, birds of a feather, right? In any case, let's talk about the game. I know you were not there. I know you have watched, as you said in your words, enough to know what happened for sure, and to get a grasp on the issues. Boy, that was hard to watch. I'm sure that was really hard to watch knowing the outcome. But what were your thoughts on that whole ordeal in Oxford?
Well, first of all, watching it after the fact is really different. It's more like being a player and going in and watching the film after the game on Sunday. Being there during the game, and you find yourself so much more involved in it, trying to see what's going on and understand what the coaches are trying to do and all that. But then when you watch it after the fact, you feel like you're watching a film of history. So it's much tougher. You don't have the emotion or anything, and so it's a tougher thing to do.
Well, before we get into the game stuff, I know that you had some former teammates and things at your daughter's wedding this weekend that you spoke to. I know you're constantly talking to former players. You're plugged in to a large degree in that world. And look, I'm not saying they're going to make a coaching change or anything like that. I don't know. There's a lot of season to play out, but it's clear to me from watching Twitter and from talking to a few people who were former players that there's not a lot of happiness right now around Vanderbilt football, I think it's safe to say. And I guess that gets to the so what part. What voice do you feel that former players have right now with the new AD? Is this a situation to where a lot of voices are being heard? Is Malcolm Turner seeking them out? What's your sense of how that is going?
Yeah, all I can tell you is what I hear because I've not really had any conversations. But talking to some of the former players, that they really are seeking them out and saying, "And look, why are you guys not involved anymore? Why do you not care or whatever? And we want to get you back involved." And I know they started giving them a meal. They do it just outside the where we do the pre-game show. And so I'm getting to see a lot of old teammates that are just, I haven't seen in years. So there are people coming back. But, it gets tough. I mean, it gets tough if you're not coming back to see them compete and win. So it'll be interesting. But I think Malcolm Turner's really trying to hear the concerns of former players. And, that's really encouraging.
Well, we talked about this off podcast before we went on tonight, but I've gathered from you that's not always been the case from Vanderbilt.
No, I can promise you there were some years that you could walk in there and they go, why would you be here? And it's pretty important people. So, there have been years in the past that I think a lot of feelings got hurt. And, so they've got a lot of making up to do. And I'm not saying it's certainly not the current people's issue, but there were some years where you felt like just nobody wanted to hear what you had to say. And by the way, you guys were horrible, and go away and never bother me again.
I guess one of my things I always thought was I didn't feel like the former players had much of an organizational structure. I would talk to some people and they would be displeased or have opinions about this or that. And what I always said to them, as I said, I feel like you guys need to get together and try to form some kind of, not like a union, but some sort of almost a voting block or a way to have their voice heard. Is there any progress on that right now? I mean, I know the AD is listening, but I still don't know that I have a sense that the former players have like this mass organized way for their voice to be heard.
I think what I hear you saying is correct, and that there's really no organization at this point. And they did try to do that in the past. Back in the 90s, they tried to do that and get people more involved. I don't remember what the name of the club was called, but they tried to make that happen. And with varying, I've mentioned on here before that good for John Lastinger, and he's the original quarterback, and John was very much at the center of what they did with their players, and you always had a voice, and they were always looking out for each other. And if somebody got in trouble, then they were there to help them. And I'd love to see us do something like that.
I think I hear a couple of Georgia players in the background there.
Yeah, well, it's not a bulldog, but it's an Australian Shepherd and Border Collie mix. So
he doesn't sound happy, but anyway, yeah, and I guess that's the thing that always befuddled me a little bit is we're in this era of LinkedIn and Facebook and Twitter. Like there are more ways than ever for people to organize, and that's always the thing that I always looked at. I just like how is it not possible that there's not more of a connection there?
That's a great question, and the best I can tell you is I've always tried to be one of the ones that kept everything together, that would make the phone calls and get everybody together, not together, but just, such and such, he's having a hard time. If you give him a call, it would help out a bunch, and just try to make sure that the people that they could lean on were there for them. And it's just not very organized. So I'd love to see us have something way more organized, and love to see the players from different generations get to know each other.
Well, back to the season for a minute. The thing that I'm always watching for when a season goes horribly wrong is, does it take on a life beyond itself? In other words, a lot of times a team is a lot more talented than it's shown, and then chemistry issues seep in, and a season can fall apart in a hurry. I think Derek has done a pretty good job, for the most part, during his career of keeping those things from happening. This one seems like it could be a different animal. You have guys with a lot on the line with pro stock. Sometimes you have competing agendas. I'm not saying that's the case here, but I'm looking at this from the outside. I'm saying, okay, if you have a season that's not going well, you have three guys trying to get to the NFL who probably all seen their stock drop based on the
I'm
season.
I'm going to play for myself.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, how do you keep this from spiraling out of control, whatever permutation that takes at this point?
Well, in the first place, if it does happen, the team's really, really in trouble. You've got to have a situation where every player out there is fighting for the other players, and if the guy that's playing behind the starter is really rooting for the starter, and if that starter goes down, he becomes the starter. But he didn't want that to happen. You've got to have that kind of camaraderie within a team, and if you don't have that, you don't really have a team. So I don't think that's what's going on. I think what's going on is there are a lot of kids that are getting time for the first time, and they look good, and then all of a sudden they don't look good. It's the old saying, he looked good until he didn't look good. So, there are a lot of people that are playing not their first downs, but their first year or their second year. And it takes so long for this game to slow down for you that, and we talked about it before the podcast, there were 4 carries for something like 220 yards. And they were basically the ball game. Well, how do you prevent those 4 carries from happening? Somebody didn't get where they're supposed to be. And if you're Vanderbilt, you're not going to outrun them to the spot. You're going to have to be there before they get there. So it's not going to be an athletic thing. It's going to be a mind thing that you have to do what you were coached to do before it happens.
I want to get into some things specific to their season and why it has gone wrong in a minute. And frankly, I didn't find a lot of Derek Mason's explanations today particularly satisfying, but it is what it is. But 2 things that stick out to me on the defensive side of the ball, Norman, they're just not fast. I don't know, maybe they are out of position a little bit, but I don't know how many times now you're just seeing guys lose foot races to the end zone. And the problem with that is their defense seems to me to be structured around stopping the big play, and they can't even prevent the one thing they're most trying to do. I've not seen a defense get beat this much at Vanderbilt in a long time.
Well, if I can mildly disagree with you, it's not fast on defense. It's where are you? And I remember our old defensive back coach when I was playing. He was the coach of what's his name? He's an all-pro safety for the Redskins. I think Chris Murphy. Anyway, he asked me one time, he said, what do you think he ran? I said, 4.5. He said, 4.9. But he never took a wrong step. And I think that's what you're looking at is guys that are taking the wrong steps. If you just take one, that first step is wrong, and it's somebody really quick, they're going to get by you. So it's the recognition of where you've got to be. And I don't know if that makes any sense to anybody out there, but that's really what it is. It's angles. It's a game of angles. And if I see something coming, I've got to know, do I need to go out past this guy to try to make the tackle or get in the middle of it? And that only comes with seasoning.
Well, I can definitely see a lot of truth there, but look, they're not the only team in college football that's got some youth on their defense. And yet, and I get that LSU, Georgia have been on the schedule, and Purdue was Sindelar, which was a different animal, but it's just hard for me to fathom how they are that much out of position that often.
Well, again, I mean, I'll stay where I am because I think you can play cornerback in the SEC and still be probably a 4.6 40 guy if you can read what they're going to do. If you're smart enough to understand what's coming down the pike here. So it's really they got to find the guys that can get on the field and keep on the field that really understand what's going on, because you can't keep throwing young guys out there and expecting them to play like they're seniors, because they're not going to play like they're seniors. Some of them will, some of them won't. They're going to need the reps.
Well, and to your point, Jawan Williams was the quintessential 4.6 guy. And Jawan did get beat deep some, like Georgia did it to him last year, but it didn't happen a ton. And I think that I know there's validity to what you're saying for that reason. But I guess Derek did have an explanation in that regard today, in that he talked about cohesiveness and not having the same guys next to each other. But and I know they've had a lot of injuries. It just still seems to me like, okay, all those things is valid points. It still seems like there should be some improvement beyond what we've seen.
Well, here's what I'll say to all this is I think the whole game of football in college and in the pros, for that matter, has gotten so caught up on being matchups that they've lost what you're out there to do. It's like Northern Illinois. I loved what they did. They've typically played a two tight end offense. One may be the fullback, the other may be playing tight end, or they may have two tight ends. One may be the slot receiver with a fullback. And it was so you can't match up with them. If I've got a guy that can do the things, if he can play two or three positions, then all of a sudden I'm cooking with gas, because you can't match up with me because you don't. I've got my same players out there and you can't substitute. So I think people have gone a little bit substitution happy. Here's the matchup we need right here. Well, no, you need your defense out there that plays the best.
So what's your best fix for all this on defense?
Oh, goodness knows. I'm probably the worst person in the world you could ask about this, and certainly an offensive player. And, I understood defenses. I look at the first two drives against Northern Illinois, and basically we came out and we threw from run set and we ran from throwing sets. It's really mix up. You do so many coverages now. There's the 3 deep, there's the 2 deep, there's the one over the top, and if I'm Vanderbilt's defense right now, I've got to stop the run. I mean, I've got to stop the run unless we come upon a situation like LSU. But you can't give up 412 yards rushing. You give that up, you're going to lose, and no turnovers on either side.
Well, the issue with that right now is their defensive line is, I think, thinner than they planned. Zen Turner's done for the year, which I don't know how much of an impact he would have made, but he would have helped, I think. They think he would have helped. That's that big body they need in the middle. Malik Langham, I think, would have helped for sure. Found out today he won't play this year. So that's 2 down. I don't know what happened to Stone Edwards. He's not on the depth chart anymore. I presume there must be some ailment or something there. I think he would get snaps. But, I mean, I think they only played 7 true defensive linemen, 5, 6. I don't know. I wrote about it today. It's in my notebook. People can check that online for free. But point is, defensive line's what you think of when you think stop the run, and they're certainly nowhere near 100% there.
Yeah, I mean, you can stop the run with a thin defensive line, but you got to have some linebackers and some big, like a big, strong safety that can come up and play, because, I mean, and this is the SEC, and they're going to push you around if you can't get the angles. And I mean, even in the defensive line, if you can't get the angles they're going to push you around because it's a lot of big angry guys that have been taught really well about how to block and this zone blocking thing, and they're not going to miss a linebacker because you happen to shoot a gap right here because it's a zone blocking. They're going to find the linebacker, and then the running back cuts off the block of the linebacker.
Well, let's talk offense for a minute. I don't think the root cause is one thing there. Jerry Godowski's taken a lot of heat for play calling and things, but I think that I had a source tell me today that there seems to be a good bit of freedom for the quarterback to check out of things. And if this guy's right, then, okay, let's see what you're watching. Right now, you got both quarterbacks who are playing, Riley Neal and Deuce Wallace, both are running the same offense. You got one guy in Neal who is throwing a lot of passes toward the sidelines. And frankly, when I watch his clips at Ball State, he did the same thing. He did not use the middle of the field a lot of short throws and a lot of cross-field throws to the sidelines, that sort of thing. You're seeing the same thing at Vanderbilt. When Deuce Wallace comes in, Deuce will take some shots downfield. Now, Deuce has not been that productive. I'm not saying they didn't make a quarterback switch. And Riley, I think, has got the better raw tools. But it seems to me that a lot of this comes down to the fact that Riley Neal just does not seem to want to really push the ball downfield that much.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't do that pretty early and pretty often, then you're telling the defense that, look, your safeties get to rest. They can just play over the top and make sure everything happens in front of them. And, yeah, if you've got a great screen game, that can work for a little while, but you've always got to threaten deep. And, you know, I have to go back to my playing days to kind of explain things. But I remember Tennessee, when they came up here my senior year, they were rushing 1 and 2 guys, and they were dropping 9 and 10. But what they were doing is they were making sure that they cut off the short passes with me and Alamo, and then we just killed them deep. You know, they're trying to keep the play in front of them, and if you can go running by the last guy, you're going to make a big, big gain.
With Riley, I look at him and I see tools. I see he's got a really good arm. He's not Mike Vick, but he's not terribly slow. And I just see a kid right now who seems like he's very reluctant to use any of his tools for whatever reason. Now, I think that when your offensive line is struggling, maybe that gives you the yips a little bit. But at the same time, you know, he's played ball for a long time. I don't think his cast at Ball State was, you know, a star-studded one, to say the least. I doubt his offensive line was the best in the country. So he's used to playing this. I don't know if he's – I don't know what's fair to say here. I'm just talking out loud, but it's almost like he's got the yips when it comes to throwing downfield. I don't know if that's the way to phrase it. I don't know if that's fair, but when I watch him, the tools that he has and the way that they are being used just don't match up to me.
Well, I think we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. If I'm bringing a safety across the top and I'm taking Pelagio away, which is the favorite target, then that forces me, if I don't have somebody else going deep, that forces me to check down and throw underneath. And another thing, it does seem like he's a little bit reluctant on the run pass option, that it's almost always going to be the run. And frankly, I think he could pull that ball, and you know he's fast enough to get out there. And if you can get out there, all of a sudden you change the way the linebackers play the game. As far as I'm concerned, if you can change the way the linebackers play the game, you change the whole defense.
Let's go ahead and get into the mailbag, which is sponsored by Vanderbilt fan and independent insurance agent Josh Minton of Brentwood. Are you in the market for auto, motorcycle, home, renters, or landlord insurance? What about life or commercial insurance? Call Josh, 615-933-1979. Email him at josh@hqinsurance.com. Follow him at facebook.com/JD Minton HQ. He's my insurance agent. I hope you'll make him yours as well. Mr. Vandy says, what can be done, if anything, to help this offense get things headed in the right direction?
I think you've got to realize early, very, very early in the game, if you're going to take Elijah away and take Pinkney away, or if you're going to take Keyshawn away, you can't take all three of them away. And I think you got to play that game real early and figure out what they're trying to do. And Mike McIntyre, I've known Mike since he was a little kid, and he's a good defense coordinator. And I have a feeling, I didn't get to look at enough tape to see it, but I got a feeling that Mike set a lot of things up and made it look like it was attractive over here, but it really wasn't. Not unlike what Clemson did to Tua in the championship game last year. So, if I'm Vanderbilt, I'm going to line up in just a straight eye with the quarterback with the snap and with Keyshawn right behind me, and I'm throwing from there. Every time I look at it on the field, it looks like they're doing that. I'm fully expecting a give. So take that and go in behind the linebackers and keep those guys honest.
Speaking of Mike McIntyre, do you think he gets a head coaching shot again?
Yeah, he will. He will. We talked this summer, and he definitely will. You don't become the national coach of the year and never get another shot from the age that he was at. So he will, and I'm sure he learned a lot. And I don't know if we talked about this on any previous podcast, but being a head coach and being a coordinator are two totally different things. You're an administrator when you're a head coach. When you're a coordinator, you get to get into the X's and the O's and the stuff that you really love. But when you become the head coach, it's more like like you're the master of the symphony. You're out front with the baton and you're leading everything, but you don't really remember how to hit the notes that you once were able to hit. If that makes any sense at all, I hope so.
No, it does. And, he did a really good job at San Jose State, too, which is a program that, for the life of me, I can't think of when San Jose State has won before or after him, but it sure did win when he was there.
Yeah, no, and Mike did a great job, and he deserved to get the Colorado job. And, honestly, I didn't feel like he deserved to be fired. Certainly not in the way that he was. But he'll have another head coaching job, and he'll do a great job at it. It's sometimes your damaged goods are your best goods.
What happened to him at Colorado? Was that sometimes a coach can be okay, but after 5 or 6 years of the same guy, if he's not just consistently outstanding, a little fatigue sets in fairly or unfairly. I don't know if you have any particular knowledge of that situation, but I was just curious what if you know anything there.
I kind of know, but I don't know enough to even talk about it, to be frank. There was an issue with a player. I don't remember the particulars of it, and it didn't play out really well. And that kind of left Mike hanging. Then he didn't have a real good year that year. And between the combination of the two, that's what got him.
Fair enough. Well, I feel like, boy, it's harder to do these things just because we don't have a lot of original content every week. These seasons are just really tough when you're in the middle of them to cover. I'm sure it's tough on the coaching staff too, but anything that we didn't get to that's worth discussion before we end the show tonight?
The only thing I would say is, keep the faith. They can come back and they can start playing better football. All of a sudden you look out and the switch was flipped and they're playing better. I very, very seldom ever wear anything that says Vanderbilt on it. It's just not what I do. And I'm right now wearing an anchor down shirt. And the last time I think I wore anything Vanderbilt besides to do the ball games was after we lost to Michigan the first game in the College World Series. So that's kind of where I am right now. It's going to get better.
Hey, Norman, thanks for joining us, and we look forward to talking with you again after the UNLV game.
All right. Thanks, Chris.
He's Norman Jordan. I'm Chris Lee, host of the Vandy Sports Podcast. Thank you for listening. We'll have a couple more of these to come later this week.